Let's see, number three, storytellers. We talk about this is part of the HSC model that I talk about a lot, the story aspect. And this is where the confusion comes in when people think, oh, they're a great salesperson because they're a BSer, they're somebody who's always telling a story or making a joke or whatever. The only reason those people tend to be okay in sales, the BSers, if you will, is because they do tell stories, which stories are an important part of selling. But they're the other two aspects, the H and the C, are not done correctly, and the story isn't used correctly. And so, again, somebody who's an introvert who doesn't have that natural storytelling ability to just kind of talk about stuff off the cuff, they may do better than the person who's the extrovert. But it's story. And so, and it's not just story that they're good at. They're good at painting a picture because we all think in pictures. Painting a picture for the prospect, putting the prospect in the middle of the story, so the prospect is picturing themselves and comparing themselves to the character, whoever's in the story, and seeing that character that they can relate to so well because of the way the salesperson is crafting the story, and seeing that character move towards the solution that the salesperson is selling. And that's about changing beliefs that we talk about a lot also, as part of the story. And that's because if we don't do that part, the whole closing, that's where we get into the arm twisting and everything else that gives salespeople a bad rap. But professionals know how to tell the story, involve the prospect in that story, and help them, visually see themselves moving towards their solution and start as a user of that solution. And once they make that identity shift, bam, now all they need to be is close and just given a reason to buy. So they're great storytellers. Next, intentional language. What do I mean by that? Intentional language, I mean, when we're talking about phone sales, people always think about scripts and they think, well, I don't need to use a script because, every conversation is different and, you can't, memorize a bunch of lines or whatever. It just doesn't work that way. Well, you're wrong. Sorry, but I've been doing phone sales a long time, and scripts are absolutely critical to what you're doing. And oh, by the way, you're already using them, so don't poo-poo them. We all use scripts on a daily basis. I mean, somebody asks you, hey, how you doing today? Guarantee you'll be one of those people who'll be like, oh, great, how are you? Or I'm good, or I'm 6 feet above ground, or whatever. You have the same pat answer every time, most likely. We don't vary it because it's a script in our head that we just boom, 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 it just comes out. And it's the same thing. We're talking to our kids, we're talking to our friend, we're talking about this subject, that subject. We use the same phrases over and over again. And in sales, a person will go to their first sales presentation and they may have an outline, but they don't have a script or whatever. They don't have specific wording come up with. And so they'll just kind of, and that's where you get into the, feature barfing and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is they've done all of that. They haven't thought about it, what they're saying. They're just saying it. Nothing happens. They don't get the sale. But what do? They go to the next one. And what's the brain do when they go to the next prospect? The brain goes, well, let's see. Last time I used this language, I said this, this, and this, these phrases. So I'm going to say them again because I already know those. And it makes it a lot easier and more comfortable. So over time, somebody's using a script in their head, and we all do it again, whether in sales or not. And the wording that's in there is by accident. It's not intentional. But top professionals who are salespeople, they use intentional language, meaning they've thought about the words they're using. Are the words that they're using in a specific phrase, does that create the image in the person's head of what they're trying to say? Because, there's a difference between, hey, do you want to sell your home, or hey, you want to sell your house? Because our home is an emotional thing that is important to most of us. It's security, safety. But when you want to sell your house, it's just this asset you're getting rid of. And that little subtle change in wording makes a difference. And they've shown studies on that kind of stuff. And so professional salespeople use intentional language. They've thought about what they're going to say. They've memorized it. And, not a one rote, telemarketing script or something like that, but they know the right phrases. They know the right stories to tell. And if you listen to any good salesperson, over and over again, watching with a presentation with a different prospect, you hear the same lines over and over again. Not necessarily in the same order, but you hear the same stuff over and over again. And that's because they use intentional language. Okay. And so what's the last one? Okay. Great closers. So in addition to being great storytellers, they're great closers. And well, everybody thinks, oh, geez, I got to be a great closer. I got to be really, twist somebody's arm. And again, if you're twisting somebody's arm or it's taking a lot of effort to close somebody, then you're doing it all wrong because the close should be the easiest part of any sale. By the time they get to the close, the prospect should be almost asking you to buy. In fact, a lot of times they will if it's done right. But it goes back to story and the hook and the HSC model. And if all that's done correctly, then close is it's all about helping a prospect get over just that initial kind of, status quo. I want this, but, maybe I can put it off until next week. Maybe I can, ask my spouse as an excuse to procrastinate on this decision or whatever, and helping them get through that. And most salespeople hate closing because they feel like they're asking somebody to do something they don't want to do, and they feel like they're manipulating, which they are because they're doing it wrong. But done correctly, a top salesperson has no problem asking for the order, so to speak, asking for the close because they know they're helping somebody. They know that that person wants that. They know that it's good for them, and they know that they just need to help them get over that last little hump, and they can make a difference. So they have complete confidence. There's no guilt. There's no hesitation. And so great top salespeople know how to close. They know how to do it properly with, the USF model we talked about before. So these are the top 5 that I found. Again, I'm sure there are more, but these are the of all the hundreds of salespeople I've dealt with and hired over the years, the most successful ones all have all of these, or at least the majority of them. So, okay, so what do you actually do with these? Now that we know these, well, the best thing to do is, first of all, let's say you're hiring for salespeople or salesperson, you want to describe the job in terms of these things. You want to talk about prospecting. You want to talk about customer focus. Talk about storytelling. Talk about all these attributes because that's going to attract the right person. That's going to attract the salesperson you want, and it's going to repel those that don't. If you put prospecting in there, that's going to turn off a lot of people. And it's like, well, maybe instead of 100 applications, you get 10 because they're scared off by that word prospecting. Good. You don't have to waste your time with the other 90. Why would you do that to yourself and cost yourself a ton of money? So first do that. Come up with a job description that fits all these things. And then, when you actually, let's say you're sitting down face to face with an interview with them, make the questions of the interview not, tell me about yourself, but hey, tell me about your daily schedule. What did you do on a daily basis? And if they say, well, I worked with customers and I called on accounts and I organized my CRM system, whatever, and there's nothing in there about prospecting, well, boom, red flag. And red flags are there to be paid attention to. So you can change the questions in interviews to tailor to these things and make sure that you're eliciting the responses that are going to tell you, do they have these attributes? So it takes a little time, to spot these attributes in people. But again, the questions you ask during the interview process can be very helpful in doing that. You're not going to get it 100% of the time. You're not going to get it right because some people are, let's face it, they're better fibbers or liars than they, we would like to think they are. But people will make up stuff, to get through an interview. But largely, if you tailor the right questions, it's very hard for somebody to get through the process that's actually not qualified and actually not the person that you want. So use those top 5 attributes. Make that the basis for all your hiring and your training when it comes to salespeople. So now that you know these attributes and you know how to implement them, think about this. If you were hiring salespeople today and a year from now, what would it look like? Suddenly, instead of churning through salespeople, like a lot of us have done or do, you've got a consistent group of salespeople you haven't had to hire for 6 months because guess what? You found the right people. The only hiring you would need to do is to expand even further because your sales are going so good. You don't have the stress of having to fire people. You don't have the stress that it causes the staff in there if you hire the wrong people. Because let's face it, if you've got good salespeople sitting with people who are not so good and who don't have these attributes, and those people are sitting there playing Tetris or poker or whatever it is on the computer these days, while the other person's prospecting, it's going to hurt morale. So, it not only helps morale with the other salespeople, it helps morale with the other people in the company. And, let's say again, it's about money. It's a huge amount of money you can save by doing this, by getting it right the first time. So it's a stress reliever for you. So there you are. You've relieved a bunch of your stress, made a ton more money. You've had, got stability, and you don't spend all your time trying to hire and fire. I mean, that is definitely worth your time, in my opinion.